guy named John Waters came in and put together an angel investment to save the company. And when he did that, he sat down with everyone there and said, how can we turn this company around? How can we make this something we can actually sell to people and make it valuable? And my current boss, and my boss back then, David Endler, he came up with the idea of, why don't we just expand out to researchers worldwide instead of hiring everyone internally, and let's just buy vulnerabilities from people one-off. And then when we sell the feed to our customers, they get to know about this information ahead of time, and thus the idea was born. And when it was born, it was announced, and here is, this is the original iDefense Vulnerability Contributor Program website that was made. And you can see here, these prices are not very impressive. For vulnerability and an exploit, if you have sold more than 4 iDefense, you would get $400 per bug at the time. And we had, to me, coming from a college student perspective, I thought this was a decent amount of money. Now we know that that's not correct. You can get a whole lot more, ranging from a couple thousand to a couple $100,000. But this was the first iteration and the first attempt to actually create a market around vulnerability research that was publicized. But it's not to say that iDefense actually created the market. This market existed long before. Before anyone was buying vulnerabilities, people were trading them with one another. If I found an O-Day, I can talk to a friend of mine who had one and we could trade with one another. And there was also word-of-mouth programs where individual companies, even some of those who were originally making fun of or criticizing iDefense, I later came to find out were behind the scenes actually purchasing bugs, just not advertising it. So when iDefense first started, they sent out this email to anyone who had pretty much sent in at least 1 or 2 bug track reports. And I was among that list of people. I had found a couple of silly vulnerabilities when I was in college. And I saw the email advertising vulnerability sales, and I saw the name on it was Dave Endler, which I recognized from my university, Tulane. And so I said, instead of me becoming a researcher, why don't I just jump on board the ship? I asked them if they needed an analyst. They said yes. I was hired, and so I started with iDefense 1 month after the conception of the VCP. In 2005, the company sold to VeriSign for $40 million, of which, I got none of it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I would be on a boat somewhere. So I got none of that, and I left, and I joined, Dave had left prior. I joined Tipping Point, and we started the Zero Day Initiative. And this one, I feel, is a really drastically different program in some regards, and in my opinion, it's close to as good as it's going to get for everyone across the board. The vendors who are affected, the researchers who are affected, or the researchers who are finding the bugs, and us as a company. So the markets, players, prices, etc. This is my classification of how the market breaks down. Different people can see it differently, but since this is my talk, this is how we're going to classify it. There's vendor bug bounties, so companies that will actually offer money for you finding bugs in their own software. There's the white market. I consider the white market anything where when you sell the information to someone, you know exactly where it's going. It's going to the vendor, or it's going to XYZ clients. Then you step into the gray market where you're not so sure of where your information is going. You sell a vulnerability to the gray market, and maybe it's going to .gov, maybe it's going to someone else overseas. You're not entirely sure. And then finally, there's the black market where, for certain, you know that who you're selling it to is going to be using it for nefarious or bad purposes, and whatever that entails. So I hear a lot of people saying that there's no fair market value on vulnerabilities, and there's some credit to this point, but I personally disagree. So I think that depending on what you want and what you are willing to give up, there is a fair market value price. We're going to see later how great the prices can fluctuate from one vulnerability purchaser to another, but the requirements also fluctuate. So for example, on the white market, which is what I consider the Zero Day Initiative, there isn't much required by way of giving us a submission. If you can find a crash and send us that crash, we'll work with you and tell you, yes, it's exploitable, no, it's not, here's where it lies, here's the code paths which are affected. We'll actually work with you and go back and forth, and we've actually had researchers who 2-3 years ago would send us crashes and didn't know much about what was going on behind the scenes, and today they're very impressive, because during the back and forth, they just and so they have a very tight relationship to us, and it's fun for us because we get to see someone kind of grow alongside the program. If you're selling to the gray market, it's going to be a lot more effort on your behalf. You need to write an exploit. That exploit has to be reliable.
The time it takes for them to get back to you and pay you is going to be longer, but the money is greater, and you get no credit. So there's trade-offs between the different ones. And of course, also in the black market, you have to be willing to sell an exploit to someone that you know is going to be using it to infect machines worldwide, create botnets, steal money, yada yada. There's actually a really interesting TED Talk that came out last week by this guy named Misha something or other, and he was talking about how 15% of the world's GDP is organized crime, and a big portion of that these days is cybercrime. So if you're okay with getting the bigger dollar values for contributing to that environment, so be it. So I think that there is a fair market value depending on what you are willing to give and what you're willing to get. Initially, when we were designing the ZDI, it wasn't geared the way it was right now. Initially, the ZDI 0.1 was going to be an auction model with reputable buyers. So the idea was the following. We would create an auction site, Tipping Point would host it, and we would go to the different vendors, sign them up, and we would go to different security companies and sign them up. As a researcher, you would submit a bug to the auction, we would verify it, we'd say yes, it does work, and then we would let the market decide what the price is worth. So people can bid, and let's say a bug that affects, I don't know, Microsoft Windows, remote pre-auth goes up to $30,000. So that's the final market-determined price. We would then take that, go to the vendor, and give them first right of refusal. So we'd say either, and to us as well. So Tipping Point / the vendor has the opportunity to have the first right of refusal and take that off the table. Otherwise, it goes to whoever the highest bidder was. So this we thought would be the best way to ensure fairness for everyone across the board, but legality issues and other complications just made this not possible. So we kind of transformed to what we see today, which I'll talk about later. So diving into the different markets, the vendor market. This is the smallest group. There's Mozilla, which is the most well-known bug bounty. It's $500 a pop. Did someone else join? Sweet. GhostScript, which will pay $500 for bugs and $1,000 for bugs that are priority P1 or P2. If you look at the speaker notes on this slide, you'll see the actual link for it. There's 94 bugs that currently qualify as bountyable. So that's over $30,000 that this company has put up to secure GhostScript. There's DJB. He has the software Qmail and DJB DNS. He put up personal funds, $500 for a bug in Qmail, and I think $1,000 for anything in DJB DNS. In 2005, Ganinsky found a Qmail bug, but was denied the payment because of it was a 64-bit issue, and DJB claims that it's not valid to ever give that many gigs of memory to Qmail, so that was denied. But earlier this year in March, one guy did win the actual bug bounty on DJB DNS, so that was the first time that there was, according to DJB, a bug that was actually in his software. And then finally, the biggest prize I've ever seen out of a company for sponsoring a contest is the Google Native Client Security Contest. They were offering the comical values of 1024, 2048, all the way up to 8192 for bugs that were found. And Mark Dowd actually won that competition. He did some really good work there. Then we have advertised programs. So these are all the different companies that host programs, at least that I know of. If anyone knows of other ones, please either shoot it up on the talk or catch me afterwards. I'd like to know about it. iDefense, and this is listed in order of appearance. The first one to come on the scene was iDefense, followed by Digital Armaments, Tipping Point, and I'm going to go through all of these one by one real quick. So 2002 iDefense, there's 3 sections on each of these slides. There'll be incentives. What is the incentive to the researcher? There's motivation. What is the motivation for the company actually holding the what is the motivation for them actually holding this program? And just some miscellaneous notes. So for iDefense, they're offering both cash and credit for the bugs that you find. You sell them a vulnerability, eventually it will be made public, you'll get credit for it, and you'll get paid for your work. There's also an annual competition for $50,000, $25,000, $10,000, $5,000 prizes, but that competition is with one another. So if there are 100 security researchers who are participating in the VCP, at the end of the year, iDefense will choose which were the best bugs. First place gets $50,000, and second, third, and fourth end up with less. So you're competing against other researchers. What does iDefense get out of it? Well, they have an annual subscription feed, where if a company wants to know about all the bugs that are going around the world, including the VCP bugs, they can pay for this feed. And the feed price is about $100,000 for Tier 2. Tier 2 gives you unspecific details and no proof of concept. And the price can skyrocket from there if you actually want full details and proof of concept code. And finally, they have 59 disclosures so far this year. On average, it's over 100 every year. And in raw numbers, they beat us, but they also have a broader range. They're interested in local vulnerabilities as well, which the ZDI is not. So 2 years after iDefense came on the scene, digital armaments appeared. And these guys, I'm not quite sure who's behind it. I know the companies and at least someone's name behind every single one of the other advertised programs, but I'm not sure who's behind Digital Armaments Contributor Program. So their incentives is they offer you cash, they offer you credit, and what they did, which was kind of interesting, is they're offering you equity per bug. So every time you find a vulnerability and sell it to Digital Armaments, they're going to give you stock in their company. So assuming that the company does well, you can one day cash out that stock. Or so the advertising goes. What's in it for them? Well, they also have an annual subscription fee, which ranges from $6,000 on the lower end to $120,000 on the upper end. And the lower end gets you just a basic feed where you can read what kind of vulns there are. On the upper end, you actually get the ability to take bugs off the table so that no one else can see it. So this is kind of spanning the world of white and gray market, because depending on who has access to the feed, your bug may or may not ever go to the vendor. It may end up in someone's hands who just takes it off the table before anyone else gets to see it. They have less than 10 disclosures ever on their site. They also lifted their literature from the VCP. So at the time, I was working at iDefense, and these guys popped up, and it was really annoying for us because their website was a carbon copy of our website with some spelling errors in it. So I assume whoever is running this thing is not native English speaking. But they're still around. I've talked to a couple of guys who were credited on their advisories. They seem pretty flaky. None of the equity things that they promised had gone through. And a couple of the guys I spoke to said that after the first 2 submissions, they stopped working with DACP. Then the next one out was the tipping point ZDI. And I'll go through this pretty quickly because we're going to talk about some of the internals of the Zero Day Initiative in the next section. But in essence, what we offer is cash and credit per bug, and we also have a point system. It's kind of like Delta has Sky Miles. We give you a point for every dollar that we pay out. And then depending on how many points you have at the end of the year, you can get a cash bonus. So if you have 50,000 points, you get a $20,000 cash bonus. We fly you out to Black Hat. We give you 25% increase on all your prices next year, and we double your point value for everything you get next year. So if you're a platinum reward winner and you got a bug that got sold for 10,000, you would actually get 10,250, 10,000 or 12,050, and you would have 20,000 reward points. That's how our thing works. And then our motivation, why do we do it, is, well, we get increased protection time. If we have a bug that comes out today from Microsoft, we have to start working backwards to try and figure out, okay, how do we get this patch out to our customers through our intrusion prevention system? But if we know about that bug 6 months ago, that gives us 6 months of time to write the filter, put it in the wild, see if it's going to false positive, see what kind of traffic it's going to trigger on, and so on and so forth. The other benefit that we get is we get to monitor for zero-day exploitation. So when we get a bug, and I'll talk more about this again later, we can actually see around the world, is anyone exploiting this bug? And if they are, then we can escalate it with whoever's affected and also release to our clients. Some notes on this program. We've had 65 disclosures so far this year. We track about 100 on average per year. And one of the neat things that we do is we actually list all our upcoming disclosures and what day we reported it to the vendor. We have about 120 of those on our upcoming disclosure page. And finally, we do free information sharing with security vendors, so even our competitors. And again, I'll talk about this later. 2007, we saw Wabi Sabi Lobby come out. This was the first actual public auction program. So Roberto Priatoni and a couple other guys from Italy, what they were attempting to do is create an actual open, just like an eBay for vulnerabilities. And the concept was interesting, but for the same reasons that we didn't do it at Tipping Point, it didn't really work out in the end. They give also cash via auction per bug, and one of the other interesting things they do for researchers is they'll give you 10% of the revenue that goes to Wabi Sabi Lobby gets split across all the researchers at the end of the year. So if you contributed 10% of their total value, you will get 1% of that company's revenue that year. So they're actually doing profit sharing with the researchers, similar to how the DACP program was trying to do it. But this one was actually legitimate. Their motivation, well, they do vulnerability resales. So the bug that you sell to them, they can resell to someone else, and they'll get the difference. They also have a partnership with OneShield, which is similar to our product. It's a device you plug in, and it'll do filtering and detect the 0 days that they've loaded into that box. So they were selling a product to defend against the bugs that they were buying. Their public bug list was not very impressive. A lot of people were scoffing at some of the bugs they had there. But what's important to note is that it's not all-encompassing. The bugs that they listed on their page was not all the bugs they had. They had private auctions as well. So if they received an actual high-profile vulnerability, let's say a file format parsing vulnerability in Adobe PDF, they weren't going to put that on the website. They privately held that and shipped it among their potential buyers and never actually put that on the website. So what you see on their website, and although it's down now, you can pick it up on archive.org, was not their full bug list. Priatoni was actually arrested sometime later after his creation of the auction, but it had nothing to do with the auction site. Though, as a result of the arrest, he wrote on their blog that it was just too much of a distraction, and he ended up closing down the entire shop. So Wabi-Sabi Lobby is now defunct. It does not exist anymore. In 2007, we also saw the Snowsoft guys. They created EAP, or the Exploit Acquisition Program. The company name, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. It's NetRegard, I think. And the guy behind it is Adriel de Sawtels. I apologize if I'm butchering his name. Their incentives are, they're going to give you a cash per bug, and the benefit that they have over other programs is that they're a middleman to multiple buyers. And it appears based on their blog entry that it's to the US government. And they actually state it there. So it's US sellers or US buyers only. So you would find a bug, you'd weaponize it, you give it to these guys, they would go and shop it around to different programs, they would come back with an offer for you. So you wouldn't have to be in the know. You don't have to be aware of who the gray market players are. You can just go through these guys, and with a small finder's fee for them, they'll get the bug sold. Unfortunately for them, because it takes so long to work with the government, they ended up shutting down their program. Some of these turnaround times were taking upwards of 7 months, and researchers were getting unhappy, and it was just too difficult to work out the arrangement, so they also closed down this program, and now this one is also defunct. In 2008, we saw iSight Partners come out with the GVP, the Global Vulnerability Partnership, I believe it's called. And so what's interesting about this is that if you look behind the scenes, the guy who started this is the same guy who started at iDefense. The angel investor, John Waters, after the company sold to VeriSign, took a bunch of the employees, started his own company called iSight instead of iDefense, and opened up a near carbon copy program of the VCP called the GVP. They also offer cash per bug, but I'm unsure about the credit because if you look at their actual disclosure list, there's only a single vulnerability there. It's a Firefox issue, and I know for a fact that they've had a lot more than that. So it's unclear exactly what is happening with the bugs behind the scenes. They either have some kind of subscription fee, or perhaps they're also a reseller to the government. I'm not entirely sure. But the single disclosure is definitely a fishy aspect. And then the latest player in the game is, and this happened this year, their public announcement. They had a soft announcement last year and an actual one-paragraph description on their page this year. Beyond Security started the Secure Team Secure Disclosure, I think it's called. And they're also offering cash per bug and as a middleman to multiple buyers. So the difference with this program is that depending on who is buying that vulnerability from SSD, it may or may not go to the vendor. It's up to the person who's purchasing the vulnerability. So for example, if I, from Tipping Point, were going to go look at their vulnerability list and buy something, we would obviously go to the vendor with it. But if someone else wants to go and pick something up from them, it's up to them what they're going to do with this issue. So the disclosure process is determined by the buyer. And in talking with Noam Rathouse, who's one of the guys behind this program, I asked them what their main motivation was, and he said, honestly, the finder's fee is not a huge deal for them. He says that they created this program out of demand from their securityteam.com researchers. People were just looking for this kind of service, and they went ahead and satiated that need. So show me the money. How much are these things getting across the board? Well, if you're in the white market, where you know where your bug is going, and you don't have to provide a weaponized exploit, you're going to be getting less than $20,000 a bug. And I'd say on average, it's going to fall between $5,000 and $15,000 per discovery. If you go to a .gov reseller, someone who's going to take that bug and be a middleman and find someone in the government to sell it to, you're looking at between $20,000 and $100,000 US. And that full range will pretty much be met. I've heard numbers all across the board, in the middle at 50, as high as 80, and even in some rare cases, maybe even slightly higher than 100. If you somehow have the contacts to go directly to the government, I've heard prices ranging from 100,000 to $1 million, where the average is less than $250,000. And if these numbers sound ridiculous to you, keep in mind that a cruise missile costs $600,000. So every time we send one cruise missile into a target, that's $600,000 gone. But if I buy a weaponized exploit, I can use that against multiple targets, and you maybe even potentially glean information on where to send those cruise missiles to get better bang for my buck. So $1 million for a remote vulnerability in a high-end system is not a great deal of money for a government to be paying. And then finally, you have the black market. And prices that I've been able to kind of dig out of there is between $20,000 and $100,000, also leaning more towards the lower end, so maybe between 20 and 40 on average. But one of the frustrations that I constantly hear about from people is last-minute price fluctuations. So where when you're getting close to a deal, the price will all of a sudden change on you, and you have to deal with that back and forth. And of course, when you sell to the black market, it's being used, for sure, it's being used for bad purposes. So these are the general prices that you can expect from the different markets you can go to. So inside look at zero-day initiative. I think this is the first time we've publicly talked about what goes on behind the scenes of the ZDI. We do this for customers, but this level of details is the first time we put this together, and we're giving it to you guys. So we have over 1,000 researchers registered on our site, and about half of those have opened at least one case. So that means that the other half have just registered out of curiosity and have never sent us in anything. Of those people, most of them have only sent in 1 or 2 bugs. There's only a handful of guys who have opened about 20 or 30 cases. And our contribution rate follows the power loss or power law distribution. So if you look at the graph of our researchers and how much each one of them contributes, it's very heavily weighted towards the left side. And it very quickly tapers off, an exponential drop off, and then there's this very, very long tail of just one-off people who have submitted a single bug. And this is interesting because it mirrors what social networks see as well. I saw this talk, another TED talk once by Clay Shirky, and he was talking about why sites like Flickr do so well. And it's because they're able to tap into this long tail. When you have a company like, if you're a Core or Immunity or Tipping Point and you're hiring researchers, you have to create a management infrastructure to manage all those guys. And so you might be only getting the top 25% of people, but that covers 75% of the discoveries. But to get into that last 25%, you need to go and create some kind of system where you can touch everyone. So I may not want to hire someone who's going to find one bug every 3 years, but if he finds a good bug in those 3 years, I'd certainly like to see that bug. So this is one of the benefits to us of the Zero-Day Initiative. We've seen over approximately 1,900 cases, and we've accepted over 500 of them. We have about a 30% run rate. So if we see something, there's about 1 out of 3 chance that we're actually going to make an offer for it and purchase it. On average, we're buying 10 vulnerabilities a month. And we're really only interested in pre-auth vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities affecting Fortune 100 companies, and we will also take client-side issues that affect like Adobe PDF, Internet Explorer, things of that nature. Top origins, where do our researchers come from? Well, a quarter of them come from the United States, which is no surprise. We're a US company. The site up until last year was only in English. Now it's available in like 6 or 7 different languages. Then second place is 5% United Kingdom, followed by Germany, India, France, Brazil, Spain, so on and so forth. China jumped up on this list because we did a tour through Asia where we're kind of advertising this program, and I think that it kind of gained the trust and also just awareness of some people in that group, so that's jumped up. So eventually, Gara says, where's Argentina on this list? Well, maybe after this talk there will be more Argentinians sending to us. Oh yes, and I apologize for my New York speed of speaking. It's the only way I know how to talk. So who's behind the team? There's me going in clockwise order. There's me, Cameron Hotchkiss, Cody Pierce, Aaron Portnoy, Ali, and we have the most recent addition to our team, Kate. We didn't have a good picture of her, so I found this one when she was a child and was being attacked by a deer, so we threw that up there. And they're all sitting here in the front. If you get a chance, stop by our booth downstairs. We're running a contest in exchange for drinks, so it should be a fun time. So ZDI team, internally we call ourselves a Tipping Point Security Research Team, and now that we added Kate to it, it's plus Kate. And we have an average 19-day turnaround time for verifications and around a 14-day average turnaround time for payments. And those are raw numbers straight out of our internal system. So if you give us something, we may be able to verify it in 3 days. Sometimes we take longer than we'd like. There are some cases where we've taken 6 weeks. But on average, it's 19 days. So it means that from the time that you open a case on our portal to the time you get paid and you're done with it is roughly 30 days on average. So the life cycle, what happens when a bug actually comes in? And this is ordered in chronological order, from top to bottom, first thing, last thing. First thing that happens is a researcher has to know about us, find a bug, and create the advisory on our portal system. That gets made, it gets shot over an encrypted tunnel to our internal system. We do that so that if anyone pops our external box, it's still going to be embarrassing, but at least they won't get access to all the ODay that we'll have. We actually have an air gap in between the public system and the internal system. Once it comes into the ZDI, it gets assigned to one of us. We'll verify it. We'll go back and forth with the researcher if need be, figure out all the details of the bug, creating packet captures, documenting it. And in some cases, when we have time, we'll audit around it as well. That's why you'll see, on occasion, we'll have an advisor in the ZDI that affects Hewlett-Packard OpenView, and then we'll have 8 that come out of Tipping Point as well, because whoever was verifying it at the time will dig around it and find other bugs. Once we've actually verified it completely, we make an offer to the researcher, and if he accepts it, 3 things happen at the same time. We go to our filter writing team, and we give them the details and say, hey, here's the issue, you got to write a filter for it. We go to the vendor, and we say, here's the issue, you guys have to fix it. And then we go to our finance team and say, you got to pay this guy. And so those 3 things fire off at the same time. When the filter team is done writing the filter, we don't push it out to clients. What we do is we push it out to this network that we call ThreatLink. We have sensors that are placed strategically all around the world that see huge pipes of traffic, and we put our ZDI filters on there, and we're just watching to see, is this ODay being exploited by anyone? And I'm sure someone might be curious, how often does that happen? I'd say roughly once every year to 18 months, we'll have an issue that we know about, that someone else discovers, actively exploits it, and then we find out about it. So in the event that it is being actively exploited, we'll turn back around, go and tell the affected vendor, hey, it's time to you really got to push this up because there's people exploiting it, and then we'll push the filter out to our clients as well to protect them against that attack. Once the vendor has created a patch and they tell us, okay, we're ready to go public now, at that point, 2 things happen. We contact our partners and we tell them, hey, here's the technical details about this, so if you guys want to write a filter for it as well, by all means. And then we create the public advisory, and the issue is closed and it's gone full circle. So from top to bottom, as far as a researcher is concerned, average of 30 days. But from top to bottom for us, it can take upwards of a year, 2 years. We even have some issues you'll see later on that are over 3 years old. So the research, and this is some statistics on the research we've received over the past 5 years of running the program, only for our most prominent vendors. Obviously, we have a lot more vendors than this, but I'm only showing our top 12 or 13 most prominent ones. So in the first column, we have the name of the vendor. Second column is how many bugs we've actually purchased affecting that vendor. Third column is what's the percentage of the bugs that we've seen affecting that vendor that we've purchased. So on average, we're a 30% run rate, but you'll notice that for EMC, we're accepting 56% of the bugs that we see. And then finally, how much of our budget per year are we spending on that vendor? So Microsoft tops this chart. We've bought 133 bugs affecting them, and that's 30% of our budget has been spent helping Microsoft secure their systems. And the second to that is Apple. Who's our partners? Fortinet, SecureWorks, Sophos, StoneSoft, almost. That's actually my fault. It's been a small issue that we've been working back and forth. It's just been sitting in my email for a while. Third Brigade and Zscaler, which is probably the only vendor name that you guys won't recognize. They're a cloud-based security company based in California. And so you might be asking, where is everyone else? And that's a good question. The only requirements for you to be in the ZDI Partner Program is you have to have some kind of protected filter set. So that would rule out Snort, for example, because we don't want people to just look at the filters and be able to get the bugs. You have to have some level of encryption obfuscation. You have to give credit to the original researcher and to the ZDI in your description for your protection. And that's pretty much it. That's the only requirement. So there's no reason why, if you're a security vendor with security software, that you shouldn't be on this partner list. Part of this reason might be because we're very technical oriented, And so with the hiring of Kate recently, in this security liaison position we created, it's going to give us an opportunity now to reach out more to researchers, partners, and vendors and talk to them back and forth on a more like human level, not from a technical perspective. So this may change in the near future now that we have actual resources dedicated to talking to partners. Yes, thanks for Aaron points out that every time once the vendor is contacted, the upcoming advisory page on Zero Day Initiative is also updated to show who the affected vendor is. So over the course of time, what trends have we seen in Zero Day Initiative? And yes, also Aaron mentions, the partner program is free. It doesn't cost anything for someone to join our partner program. You can even be a competitor of ours, it doesn't matter. We will give you the information for free on the day of disclosure so that you can protect yourselves as well. And the level of detail that we give the partners is obviously different than what we give the public. The public gets one set of information, the vendor gets more technical details, as do our partners, to help them actually block the issue. So we've seen over the past couple of years an increasing rate of overlapping discoveries. This is where one person finds a bug and then a couple months later or a couple weeks later, someone else finds that same bug. And we're going to talk about one interesting case where we had 3 people find the same bug, and it was actually a very complex bug as well. We're also seeing a lot of research moving towards the client side, and this should come as no surprise. Compiler and operating system protections have made it a lot more difficult to find and exploit vulnerabilities. I mean, just this past week, it took 3 Immunity guys, really talented guys, a full week to write a reliable exploit for the Samba bug, and that's just a testament to how hard it is to write useful and reliable exploits these days. So because of that, people are moving towards the client side because you have a lot more opportunity to massage your environment. If you're an Internet Explorer, you have tons of attack surface. You have a million file formats that can be loaded. You can massage memory with Java, with .NET DLLs, with JavaScript. In SWF, you can do heap fills. And with all the file formats, there's a lot more data that you can put into it. So it's easier to massage your environment and get a vulnerability discovered and exploited on the client side. We're also seeing, although the bulk of our issues are still on the Windows platform, we're starting to see a movement from Windows towards other operating systems, specifically Apple. I mean, Apple's Mac OS is pretty far behind the security protections that Microsoft has in place, so it's a lot more of a low-hanging fruit that can be attacked, and it's more valuable for researchers. And finally, and unfortunately, there's definitely a shift in the industry from people who used to hack for credit or for props or whatever you want to call it, towards a motivation towards profit. So that leads into the No More Free Bugs initiative. NoMoreFreeBugs.com. This was first announced in March of this year. Charlie Miller, who's somewhere here in the audience, Alex Todorov, and Dino Daizovi. And it was an interesting concept. The basic mantra, which makes sense when you think about it, is if you find a vulnerability in a commercial software where that company is making money from that software, you're helping them create profits, so you should somehow get paid for it as well. And they're pushing for people to stop giving out bugs for free that affect commercial vendors. They're not saying don't disclose any bugs in open source software. They're saying if you're doing if you're doing work where someone is making money off of it, you should get paid for it as well. And they point to the VCP and ZDI and any number of other organizations that can at least get you some money for your work. There's a LinkedIn group that has over 50 members now, and that's their neat logo. So some of the vulnerabilities that we've seen. I know I'm running out of time, so let us skip this one. These are some issues that generate a lot of hype in the news that I want to take an opportunity to discuss and kind of clear the air. In 2008, we had this Kanzek West Pwn-to-Own competition. This is a competition we run once a year where we choose some targets, and then we offer a prize. It's normally around $10,000. If you can hack it, you get the $10,000. Well, Charlie came in, and and you also get to own the equipment that you hacked. He came in, and he owned the MacBook Air within 2 minutes of the contest opening, not because he sat down there and figured out the vulnerability and exploited it in 2 minutes, but because he obviously had seen the rules before, wrote that vulnerability, and came in and just proved it to us. But of course, in the media, that gets translated into headlines of, Apple owned in 2 minutes, and that created a whole roar of anger among the Apple community, which frankly is terrifying. I mean, these guys are borderline religious Nazis. Cody always jokes that one day we're going to get beaten to death by a white baseball bat because of all the problems that we've caused for Apple users across the board. When Firefox 3 first came out, this was in June of last year, within 5 hours of the bug coming out, we had received a report from one of our researchers, and it was a remote, reliable 0-day in Firefox 3. And so it was kind of exciting. You know, most of us run Firefox. This is before Chrome came out. I guess all of us ran Firefox. So we quickly verified it, reported to the vendor, and it goes up on our upcoming website. So that pissed a lot of people off because they thought that what we had done is we sat on this bug on the release candidate, waited until it went gold, and then published it to the public to create some kind of media frenzy, which of course is not the case. I mean, everything that comes into us is timestamped. It came from the portal. That's when we received it, and that's just when we got around to handling it. There was no sneaky, backdoor, crazy marketing ploy there. Another one that generated a little bit of media hype was MS-09043, Microsoft OWC. It took 2.5 years to patch these. I think it was 2 or 3 bugs that we had, and so some media outlets jumped on and said, why did it take so long? And this is just bad news for Microsoft. But the truth of it was, it's a really complicated patch. I mean, we've gone back and forth with Microsoft on this issue a number of times, and the patch had to slip because certain other issues came about, or there were some compatibility issues. So it wasn't something that they were ignoring. It was just something that took a lot of testing and a lot of work to actually get fixed. So again, it's just looking behind the hype. And finally, this year there was a IE8 12-hour ownership. This was a really great find by a guy named Nils, and there was some confusion because some people didn't consider this affecting IE8 because the exploit didn't work. And in reality, the bug is 100% there in IE8. What wasn't working at the time is his DEP bypass. So the ability to actually load shellcode through a .NET DLL and bypass depth to fall into it. But that's not to say that the bug is not exploitable, just that given the current public knowledge, there was no exploit vector. I'm pretty sure there are people who know of ways of exploiting that bug. This is an interesting one, the PDF JBig2 0-day. In September of last year, we had received a report, as did 3 other potential buyers. And this was a 0-day in PDF. And unfortunately, in this case, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. We lost the bidding war. Someone else got this bug. Well, as per our rules, we forget about it. It's removed. Can't do anything with it because we don't own the intellectual property. But in February of 2009, we saw exploitation of this bug in the wild. And we couldn't detect it on ThreatLink because we didn't have a filter for it. We didn't own the rights to the vulnerability. The first we saw of it was on EI's 0-day alert. And so once we saw that, and now it's public knowledge, we went and we grabbed a sample from, put a filter in, grabbed a sample from ThreatLink, caught one of those proof of concepts, and it was undeniably the same issue. I mean, the proof of concept that we had received had email address and website in it, and in the one on the wild, it was the exact same length email address and HTTP. It was just X'd out. So whoever modified it didn't even have the talent to deal with offsets and sizes changing, so they just blew away the character. So 100% it was the same exact bug. And that raises the question, how did it leak? I know we've never had a leak, and I can say with 99.9% certainty it didn't come from us. So how did that bug end up getting into the wild? And this is one of the risks you run of shopping around to some of the less reputable programs, is you don't really know whose hands your bugs are going to end up in. I alluded to this earlier. This was an interesting thing we had. We had an IE6/7 bug. It was MS-0831. It was a bug in substring data heap corruption, exploitable reliably. And we received it from 3 different guys from 3 different places in the world using 3 different techniques at 3 different times. So October 22nd, 2007, we received a report, and we sent it to Microsoft. Then in April of 08, we received another guy found it, and then in May of 08, a 3rd guy found it. We know all 3 of them. So we know there was no foul play. It's not like they were, trying to double dip and make twice the money from us. We know all 3 of them. We work with all 3 of them. So this is really interesting for me because in the 500 researchers that have sent us something, we had 3 guys find the same bug. So what is that going to say about all the researchers worldwide? And the point to take home from that is if you know about a bug, chances are you're not the only one. Some other interesting stories we had to deal with. This one was a fun one. Someone came to us with a bug in Sirius satellite radio. And the bug was really interesting. Essentially, what he said was, if you cancel your subscription, they'll send a signal from the satellite for up to 2 weeks telling your receiver to turn off. So if you just put your receiver in tinfoil or put it in your garage and you miss that signal, now you get free Sirius satellite for life. And we have these team meetings and this bug came up, and I was immediately excited because I've seen this bug before. It just never occurred to me why it had happened. A friend of mine has a boat. It was parked underneath a metal overhang. he canceled the subscription, and yet, for months we were listening to free satellite radio. I'm like, aha, that makes sense. This is why. It's this bug. And so obviously this is not something that we would normally handle, but occasionally we will help out researchers because they'll come to us and say, listen, I want to report this, but I'm terrified. I don't want them to know my name. I don't want them to come after me. And it was for good reason, too, because when we finally went to the vendor, first they thought we were trying to apply for a job. So they sent us an email saying, thank you for your inquiry, yada, yada, yada. So we said, okay, well, we're not trying to apply for a job. We're trying to report a vulnerability. Then they came back and tried to sue us, saying that because at the time, Sirius and XM were trying to merge, they were trying to say that we, with this one bug, were trying to completely kill this multi-million-dollar merger, and they came after us with legalese. So it's not a security issue. We never actually publicized it. We just wanted them to know about it, but it's a funny story, so now it's been fixed. You can't, they actually changed the algorithm so that it periodically sends you the deactivate. So if someone can figure out the algorithm, you can wrap it up again in tinfoil whenever you know that signal's coming down, but it's pretty much been fixed. Dishonorable mention, there's some software that is so bad we couldn't afford to keep buying bugs in it anymore. And on that list is Trend Micro Server Protect, CA ArcServe Backup, which is just terrible, and HP's OpenView Network Node Manager. I mean, these things are just so riddled with bugs. It was painful to see new ones come in. I mean, there's dozens and dozens across them. So what we did was we in the case of Trend Micro, for example, we actually sat down with the vendor on the phone and told them, listen, you guys have a lot of issues. Here's some of them. We can't take any more because we just can't afford it. Like, here's some just general things you need to do to fix the overall software, and maybe in a year when you have a new version ready, we'll entertain getting new bugs in it again. So vendors, what do they feel about markets? What do they feel about us? Well, overall, vendors are pretty happy with us because we don't resell the information to anyone, because we do responsible disclosure, and there's no real bad things happening. It's only good things happening. We're taking bugs and reporting to the vendor, getting them fixed. We're on good footing with almost everyone. Of course, getting them to publicly say that is next to impossible, but we feel the love behind the scenes. This is drastically different from my days at iDefense. When I was at iDefense, vendors hated us, people yelled at us. I mean, just short of having food thrown at me, there was all sorts of hatred for the program and for the whole market on a whole. And I attribute part of that to, as the time has gone on, people have gotten more used to the market being around, and also part of it is we do have a pretty good altruistic stance. I mean, we're not profiting off of this. I mean, our only motivation is to get filters out earlier and to monitor for 0 day. We're not making a direct profit or reselling any information. And some vendors really approve. So early in the program, NetIQ was so happy with us that they actually changed their page. Let me see. If you go to NetIQ and you try and report a security vulnerability, they actually point you to our 0 day initiative. They tell you, hey, if you want to report a vulnerability to us, you don't have to. If you want to make some money about it, just go and send a tipping point first and we'll get it from them. So that's probably the best vendor affirmation I've seen. Not everyone, though, loves us. Probably among the worst was BMC. And BMC got a 2007 Pony nomination for lamest vendor response. In essence, we didn't win, though, unfortunately. I really thought we had it in the bag, but it didn't happen. We sent them a bug, and they came back to us and said, are you a customer? And we said, no, we're not a customer. We have a vulnerability for you. Don't you want to fix it? And so we only speak to customers. So we went back and forth with these guys, and eventually we had to go public. I guess they had at some point said they had fixed it. We go public, and their vendor statement was that very paragraph. And it was just so comical that we just put it in the advisory and let the world see. I mean, they were just very nasty, saying that they don't deal with non-legit customers and all sorts of threats and these things. But they've improved. We had another bug that came out in December of 2008, and there's been a drastic improvement in response. Not that they're great, but they're no longer angry. And what's ironic is they have an office right down the block from us. They're like 1 block away. So this is, I'm going to caveat this. This is our vendor report card. Again, it only covers our most prominent vendors, and this is subjective. So we took our most prominent vendors, and we have 3 columns. We have coordination. We have communication. How good are they communicating with us? If we send them an email, are they going to respond in a week, or is it going to be 2 weeks? Are they proactive about coming to us, or do we have to go after them? So what is their score for communication? Then how organized are they? Are they losing bugs? Are they just forgetting to do things? Are they missing dates? And then how good are they at the coordination? All those 2 aside, it's a completely different story between reporting a bug and actually coordinating and getting it released at the same time. So how great are they at coordinating, hey guys, this, whatever, Tuesday, the bug is coming out, here's the one that we're fixing, here's a CV ID, moving forward. And the gold standard in the industry really is Microsoft. What I did was for every column, the best is in green and the lowest score is in red. And so across the board, Microsoft has A's. I mean, they're really proactive about going back and forth, and really the only issues we've ever had with them is because of the sheer volume of information that we give them. It gets hard to organize when you have 40 outstanding bugs affecting one vendor. But they really are the best in that program. Second to them is Apple. Apple does a really good job. Overall, they have the highest, in the fourth column, I'm sorry, is the grade point average. So when you average all of them out and evenly weighted, number one comes out to Microsoft with a 4.0, and then Apple comes in second with 3.77. I'll get to your time to fix Microsoft question later. It's in the next slide. So some of the worst vendors, IBM is terrible for us to work with. But to their credit, it's only if you look at them on a whole. They have multiple divisions. So if you look at the Lotus or the AIX division, they also get A's across the board. They're really good. But when you look at them as a whole, they're just terrible at communicating, coordinating, and just staying organized. Who else can I comment about here? Apple and Adobe have improved greatly over the past 3 years. When we first started working with Adobe, they used to sneak patches under our nose. So, someone would come to us and say, hey, why don't you guys release an advisory? And be like, what are you talking about? We'll see a report that came out from Adobe that doesn't credit us that fixed our bug, a week ago. And that's since improved. They've gotten a lot better, which is why their score reflects, modern interactions. This, if anyone out here is a reporter and you're going to take a picture of this and put it on the website, don't do it. Because I need to I'm going to caveat it and actually include some text around it so it's not misconceived or misread. And I'll put it in our blog later today, then you can do as you please. So here's the vendor response times. This is in days, again, only for our prominent vendors. And the columns here are, for every bug reported in 2006, what was the average time it took to fix that bug? Every bug reported in 2007, 8, 9, average time to fix the bugs. Then the overall average time, and the average time outstanding for all our upcoming issues. So if you look at who was the slowest in 2006, on average it took Hewlett-Packard 295 days to patch a bug that we reported to them in 2006. And the fastest was Mozilla. If you look, Mozilla is actually fastest across the board, pretty much with their response times. So to answer Garo's question, time to fix Microsoft, they vary from year to year. Their overall average is 200 days, and their average outstanding bug right now that we have upcoming is 171 days. So one other caveat, though, is these numbers in the upcoming column can get skewed. So for example, Hewlett-Packard takes the longest to patch bugs. But they don't reflect that in this column because that's just the average of how long all their upcoming submissions have been outstanding. So if we reported 12 bugs to them last month, which we did because someone sent us some HP OpenView bugs, and then Aaron audited around it and reported 8 bugs to them in one day, all those bugs have an outstanding time of, let's say, 30 days, so that's dragging down their average. What makes it more interesting is when you look at the next slide, which is, here's our top 10 most outstanding bugs, the slowest to patch bugs. So if it has a plus sign next to it, it means that it's still ongoing. We have 2 bugs from Hewlett-Packard that are over 3 years old, and they still haven't fixed these bugs yet. Then the next 2 are from Microsoft, the 875 and 866. Those are the OWC issues, which we talked about earlier. And then IBM, HP again, and Borland. And then we had Symantec, Microsoft, and CA. So these are the issues that have taken the longest for people to fix. And this is one of the main reasons that researchers come to us is they don't want to deal with going back and forth with the vendor for 3 years' time. It takes a significant effort to coordinate this. I mean, we have guys that are dedicated to actually just talking to and coordinating with the vendors. So for an individual researcher to do that, it's going to be very difficult. All right, I think I was able to squeeze it in to make up time. So what's coming? For the Zero Day Initiative, we're doing a couple of different changes. The vendor report card I just showed, we're going to do it for all our vendors, and we're going to put it publicly on the zerodayinitiative.com. So it'll be updated in real time. Every time a bug is patched, those stats will be included and put on the website. We're also going to start putting credit for the researchers on the upcoming advisories page. So right now we don't have it, but there's no reason why there shouldn't be. If you found a bug and it's going to take 3 years for it to patch it, you might want to advertise for your resume or something that you've found that bug. So we're going to put actual credit on the upcoming page. Another thing we're doing is opening up collaboration between researchers. What we found is there's a lot of guys who who can find a bug but can't actually do the work to build it out and figure out where it is. So we want to combine the luck of the guy who knows enough to find it and the skills of another guy who knows how to develop it, allow them to work together and both get paid for their efforts. So if you're a researcher, you may look at a target for months and not find a bug, just because you might not have been happening to look in the right place. So what we'll do is we'll have a little queue. You'll be able to log into the portal. You'll see a list of targets that actually have bugs in them, communicate with the researcher, and coordinate with each other to figure out the details, then come to us, and we'll make a payment that gets split between the two of you. Other things, we're doing advisory comments soon, so people can actually talk and reply and ask questions on advisories. And we're toying with the idea of doing timed release advisories, where when an advisory first comes out, it'll be really high-level overview. Then maybe after a month, some more technical details come out, and then after 90 days, even more technical details will come out. And that'll give people time to patch while other guys are reverse engineering and figuring out the bug instead of just reading our advisory. And finally, where's the market going? And this is in my humble opinion. I think we'll continue to see an increase in programs, and then they'll probably start to taper off. And I'm curious at one point there's going to be regulations put into place. I mean, when this PDF thing happened, there were questions asked because we had access to this bug. People were asking questions, how did this thing occur? And I can see at some point in the near future, at least for U.S. companies, there being some form of government-based regulation. What that is, I don't know. There's an interesting paper, I read about it from, actually prior to this talk, I think the only real material that discusses prices and markets was a paper from Charlie Miller in 2007. And he referenced this guy, Rainer Baum's paper on exploit derivatives market, which is an interesting concept, but I just don't think it'll ever work because of liquidity. You just won't have enough players. But in essence, what they're doing, what the concept is you create a stock market on vulnerabilities. So I can say, for example, I think a vulnerability is going to come out affecting OpenSSH on November 1st. And I can buy shares saying that a bug's going to come out. And then someone else might say, well, I've audited it, and I'm pretty sure there's no bugs in there, so I'm going to buy shares that say no bug is going to come out on November 1st. And so depending on what happens on November 1st, some people gain money, some people lose money. But if you don't have enough players in that market, there's no way for it to work, and I just don't see it picking up that kind of speed, building that kind of liquidity. So, but it was an interesting concept. I had never thought of, we sat down and we thought about the ZDI for a long time before we came across the model, and that was not an idea that came across our minds. So that's pretty much it. I'm sorry for rushing a little bit, but at least I got us done in time. Is there any questions anyone has to ask? No? Well, go ahead.
What happens if some guy find a vulnerability in some high-profile software such as SCADA or, let's say, telecom home location registries or stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly not going to do this kind of that's
So the question was, what happens if someone finds a bug in a SCADA system or some deep telecom, etc.? So we will, depending on the situation, we will buy that and push it on. Not because we can do something about, let's say the telecom portion of it, but because we want to give value to the researcher and get the bug out. We have had SCADA bugs go out in the past. We have had threatened lawsuits from those SCADA vendors. So that's why you don't see SCADA bugs on our page, but we have had SCADA bugs go through. And actually, we do SCADA protection on the product as well. So we have filters in place that do SCADA. But we look at those bugs as well. Are you the guy doing the SS7 talk later on? Any other questions? Yes.
How do you deal with the researchers that want to sell to different buyers the bug?
The question was, how do you deal with researchers who want to shop their bug around, who want to sell to multiple buyers? And we treat them like anyone else. We take the vulnerability, we verify it, and we make them an offer. And if they come back and say, hey, these guys offered us more, we'll negotiate, we'll go back and forth. We try to win every single bit. And especially if a guy's been with us, we like to keep our researchers happy. We don't want them going and working for other people. So in some cases we lose. In most cases we've been winning. So that's just how it goes, back and forth. But we don't dissuade them. And if someone wants to send it to us and every other program at the same time, by all means, it's in your best interest. You might get the best price, but as you see with the PDF issue, it might end up getting leaked. And in that specific case, if you do have an issue that ends up getting leaked, in most cases you don't end up getting paid. Any other questions? Let's see. Oh, any idea on earnings by researcher? Okay, so earnings by researcher is vastly different. Again, we have a handful of guys who find dozens and dozens of bugs, and then we have a lot of guys who only find 1 or 2 bugs. So I can say that every year, on average, we have 2 or 3 platinum winners, so guys who at least made 50,000 to achieve platinum, then won the 20,000, all the other perks associated with it. So a couple platinum guys will have about the same in silver, about double in gold, and about quadruple in bronze. So that will give you a general idea of what people are capable of making in this program. It's 50 to get to platinum, 35 to get to gold, 20 to get to silver, and 10 to get to bronze. And then then you get multipliers for the next year. And when we fly you out to Vegas, you don't have to come. We actually just give you a budget. It's around like 10,000 for flight and hotel. So if you want to just keep the money and stay home, you can. If you want to come join us and party with us, you can do that as well. It's up to the researcher. We don't take away their prize if they don't want to fly. Oh, yeah. Yes.
What about the mobile space?
What about the what?
The mobile space.
The mobile space?
Yeah, applications, infrastructure.
We have bought mobile bugs in the past. I actually had a slide in here that I removed. We had bought a bug that affected the Motorola Razr, which is one of the best-selling phones on the planet, like 110 million. It was a bug in MMS EXIF file format parsing. And again, that's not something that we can protect against, but the researcher didn't want to go to the vendor. It was obviously a huge issue, and we did go to the vendor. It was a big back and forth. We had some issues with them, but we've handled cases like that in the past as well. We buy cases that sometimes has nothing to do with us. We're just doing it for the sake of getting the bug out and making the researcher happy. But we will deal with those bugs as well.
But do you see a trend of those vulnerabilities being growing?
We don't see enough for me to have any valuable input on that. I mean, definitely if you look at the more advanced platforms like the iPhone, yeah, we see a huge amount of bugs coming out in that. A lot of people are now focusing on WebKit auditing, Safari auditing, so they can pop browsers across the board. So I see a lot of people moving into that space. And in general, because it's becoming so difficult to audit on a full platform, I think in general you see a lot of people moving over to not just Mac OS, but hacking the iPhone. I mean, I use my iPhone now more than I use my laptop. It does so much for me that I rarely ever need to open my laptop. So this is a good target for most people. It has my email, it has all the flirty text messages I send. I mean, it's a valuable target for someone to get to. Which one? What do I think that the .gov does with exploits? I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, I think they do what everyone else would assume they do. I'm sure that they use it for offensive purposes to, break into foreign networks. I mean, they're not sitting on it. They're not looking at it and marveling at in its glory. They have to be using it. They're not petting a cruise missile. They send it somewhere. So I think I'm out of time. One last thing I want to say before I get off stage. We're running a hacking contest downstairs. We just put together a bunch of binaries. We put purposeful bugs in there. There's about 17 in total. If you find one, we'll give you a drink ticket. If you're still standing after 17, we'll be really impressed. And the first place person will win I put together a bag, a trophy, and a bottle of Dom Perignon. So come join us in our little booth area, hack with us. If you get stuck, we'll give you hints. It's just for fun, so come on by. All right? Well, thank you very much.